So good afternoon. So in December of 2008, so after I proudly defended my dissertation and received my PhD from counseling psychology from University of Minnesota, my best friend of 20 years back home in China called me and said, "Congratulations, now you officially became a member of the third gender." And I was puzzled, okay? And she went on saying, there are 3 genders in China. There's male, there's female, and there's female PhD. I know it's kind of funny for you, but it kind of sucks for me. So the reality is that despite the fast economic growth in China, my career dream of become a professional psychologist with a 30-something-year-old being single, it's equivalent of a social suicide. I don't know how many of you heard of this phenomenon. It's called 剩女. All right, it's called the leftover women. So these women are usually highly educated, with respectful income and good career, older age, considered to be, and nobody wants them. So even up till today, my 62-year-old mother keeps on nagging me. This is what she said always. 干得好不如嫁得好, which means that establishing a good career is not nearly as important as finding a good husband. All right, the reality is that the truth is that I'm trying, okay? I've been trying. It's not because I don't want to. Who doesn't? After all, who doesn't want to have a family and live a normal life? So you could imagine about 2 weeks ago when the director of LGBT Center here on campus approached me and nominated me to speak on the topic of culture and sexual orientation, gender identity, and the first gut intuition I have, the first response I was like, great. Clearly, this is not helping. All right, so, but to be very honest, okay, how many of you sitting in the audience right now, just barely, by just looking at my title, why a 30-something single woman from China care about LGBT rights? And who is thinking back in your head this question, are you gay? Raise your hand. I know. Don't feel bad for me. I mean, the fact is that you're not alone, okay? My Chinese mother thought about the same thing. So when I turned about 30 years old, I remember having this conversation with my mother on the phone. And very quickly I realized that my poor mother has exhausted every possibility that why I'm not married, except for the possibility that I might be gay. So actually, I remember having this conversation with her, and then she says, you know, Christine, all right, if you are gay, just tell us, okay? I know we will try our best to accept you. That's exactly how I feel. I was speechless. I didn't know what to say. Well, I mean, the best way to describe my emotional reaction to my mother was in Chinese where we say 哭笑不得. I don't know whether I should laugh or cry. Regardless, I was touched. I was really touched in the fact that my mother, of 62-year-old Chinese mother, would go way out of her comfort zone and to tell me that she will embrace me and accept me despite the fact that this is such a taboo in the Chinese society. So can you imagine that I called my mother about 2 days ago, tell her I'm going to talk about this topic? Despite the fact I know that this is not going to be pretty. There's a reason why I call my mother, okay? The reality is that I'm afraid, okay? I'm so scared. You know how sometimes, you know how you're afraid? Okay, when you feel like your heart pumping really fast and your chest is tightened up, your palm is sweating and you have this tight knock in your stomach and you're feeling dizzy, and that's when you know you're scared, okay? So then I ask myself this question. Why am I so afraid? Okay. What am I scared about? In order to understand my fear, let me tell you a little story. It seems kind of irrelevant, but bear with me. This is a story of a hijab. So this is a picture of me and my Egyptian family. All right. So in Christmas of 2007, I took a trip to Cairo, Egypt, and I stayed with a family, Egyptian family, who I knew about 3 hours of my life. I spent about a week with them in Egypt. And I remember the first day I got to their house, and the next morning, my Egyptian mother, Sophia, gave me some money and said, hey, Christine, you can go downstairs and buy some breakfast. So I went down to the street, and I was not covered. So as soon as I walked onto the street, and I realized, whoa, everybody was looking. Everybody was staring at me because I'm the only one who's not wearing a hijab. So very quickly, being a chicken, and at this point you probably figured out I'm a chicken, I went upstairs and I went to my Egyptian mother. I was like, can I wear a hijab? And she was really happy. She was like, sure, you can wear a hijab. So since then, for the next week or so, I wore a hijab. And I walked around and I had a great time until the day when my Egyptian parents took me to the airport. So after I said goodbye to them and left me alone, I was standing in line waiting to take the plane from Cairo to Prague, Czech Republic. So then, this is very interesting. About 5 or 10 minutes, I was standing in line, and this is a list of a lot of passengers waiting, and most of them are European passengers traveling. And I was standing in line, and I just sensed, it's just a hunch, intuition, that somehow people are sort of backing off from me. Or they kind of like checking me out in this kind of, was almost like something written in their face and saying, why you're traveling alone? Why you're wearing a hijab? Who are you? So I felt so uncomfortable. I experienced the same thing, this tight knot in my stomach. And I don't know what to do. And I was so uncomfortable and in some ways scared, embarrassed, that I went to the bathroom. I took off my hijab. And I came back, and I stood on the line. And all of a sudden, I noticed that everybody standing next to me, they all felt as if they were relieved. They're like, whew, all right, she is normal somehow. She's one of us. So what does this have something to do with what we're talking about today, the LGBTQ rights? I think the fear is similar. I think that feeling of not wanting to be rejected, not wanting to be judged. I think that's the kind of same feelings I experienced. Actually, let's talk a little bit about sexual stigma. And so how is sexual stigma being defined? It's negative regard, inferior status, and relative powerlessness that society collectively accords anyone associated with non-heterosexual behaviors, identities, relationships, or community. So we see them as the other. We see them as being inferior. As a society, as each one of you sitting in this audience, and I felt there's a risk that I'm exposed and you will judge me. And thinking about in the next couple of days, weeks, months, or years, those people watching on the internet, the YouTube video, and what if my parents found out? So there is this feeling that as a society, it's not because then you affiliate with a particular group, it is the fear that as a society, how we're going to perceive me, how we're going to perceive these people is going to cause a lot of stress and the kind of fear that I'm experiencing. As a matter of fact, the research data actually illustrate the impact of acceptance on the person identified with LGBTQ status. So I just found out this last week. I went to a talk by Dr. Kathleen Ryan. And so she studies the impact of family acceptance on kids who are identified as being LGBT. So this is what she found out. For the kids who grew up in families where the family reported has little or no acceptance to their sexual orientation or gender identity, the kids reported 8.4 times higher rate of suicide attempts. Okay, 5.9 times higher in terms of depression. 3.4 times higher in use of illegal drugs, and 3.4 times higher in unprotected sexual intercourse. So the society, the family, the society is very powerful. It's very influential. As a psychologist, I sit in my office, and here's the benefit. I get to hear stories from people from all over the world, regardless of their race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender identity, religion, age, their experiences. So global, local, gay or straight, I hear their stories. Here's a couple of them I want to share with you. And bear in mind, these are all fake actually clients. They don't exist in reality. It's a composite of a lot of people I've seen over the years. Number one, let me talk about Anxious Marcus. So Anxious Marcus is an 18-year-old black male from Detroit, Michigan. And so he came to my office, and he sat down, and he told me the story. So apparently Marcus recently fell in love for the first time in his life with a guy named Nick. Unfortunately, Marcus grew up in a family where his father is a very prominent pastor in the local black Christian church. So Marcus was anxious and scared. He doesn't know what to do. He doesn't know whether he can bring his boyfriend back home to meet his parents, or ever being able to bring home Nick to meet the parents. Here's another one, unmotivated Ling. So Ling is a 22-year-old woman, grew up in Chengdu, China. She's a Chinese international student. So Ling came to me and says, I have a hard time really focusing. I lose interest in schools, I can't study. And I asked her why. And she told me about 2 weeks ago, she was sexually assaulted by a friend of hers, and she thought that she could trust him. And apparently then after having a couple of drinks, and then she woke up naked. And so Ling told me that she felt that she is a damaged good, and nobody ever will actually lay eyes on her. Discouraged Jose. Jose is about 21-year-old junior, coming from Lima, Peru. And so Jose came to the United States at age about 10 because his mom passed away at age about 5, and his dad was never available. So Jose came to the United States with his uncle. And then he somehow developed this deep connections with his uncles and his family. And his uncle, and about 15 or so, then Jose came out as being identified being gay, despite the fact the family went to Catholic church and as very strongly identified being Catholic, they embraced him. So Jose feels really lucky, and because he was given another chance to have a different family. However, about a week or two ago, Jose went to the health center and got tested, and he was tested positive for HIV. And so Jose came to my office, and he cried, and he said, what I'm going to do with my life? What if I will lose the only family I have in my life because I'm HIV positive? How am I going to be judged? Determined Jen. So Jen is from Texas, Dallas, Texas. She's a Caucasian female, about 20 years old. Jen was in a relationship with her boyfriend for the past 5 or 6 years, and they were thinking about even consider getting married after college. And then about a month ago, and Jen found out, and her boyfriend cheated on her. And then with her best friend. So Jen was desperate, and then she felt that as if and she was rejected on the fundamental level. And then she came to my office, and she was about 5'2", weighed about 100 pounds. And she kept on saying, you know what, I need to lose more weight because I'm fat. I don't feel good about who I am. Angry Tom. Tom grew up in Los Angeles, California. He is a 23-year-old first-year law school student, Caucasian, very good looking, and seems to have everything together. And he has a girlfriend and coming from a very supportive family, being law school, has a bright future lying ahead of him. Tom came to my office, and he told me, and he's struggling because he seems to have a problem with his anger, with his temper after he had a couple drinks. And it turned out, and then Tom has been drinking since age about 13. And this is one of the few things, and he just cannot stop. And he kept on saying, I do not want to be perceived as one of those people who has a problem. Sad Sarah. Sarah came to the United States as an international student from Tehran, Iran. Sarah is about 40 years old, and she was divorced, and she's raising a 10-year-old son on her own. She's in graduate school, she's an engineering student. And so being very lonely and isolated, and Sarah keeps on telling me, it's like, you know what, I don't know if I will ever find somebody. I don't know if anybody's going to want me because I'm a divorced woman. So you might ask me, like, how does all these people, what do these people have in common? And to me, during the course of me working with them in therapy, at some point, they all asked me, in sort of some fashion, these three questions. Am I ugly? Am I unworthy? Or even, am I disgusting? And when they ask me these questions and they look into my eyes, and I felt the same thing. I felt this kind of twist in my stomach. And I believe they're asking the same question. The question is, do I deserve to be loved? I think this is a human nature. Regardless of what is your race, ethnicity, where are you from, sexual orientation, gender identity, religion, disability, whatever that is, every single one of us wants to be loved and respected and accepted as a human being. So to end this, I'm going to leave you with three ideas or three thoughts. Number one, Ubuntu. How many people heard of that word? Okay. Yeah, it's a Zulu language. It's an African concept. So translation, it means in English, I am because we are. So in some ways that we are all connected as individuals, regardless of which part of the world we're coming from, whatever kind of experience we have. So when another human being suffers and tortured, being oppressed and being hurt, and we felt the same thing because we're connected. Number two, Pastor Martin Niemöller. How many people heard of him? Okay. So Pastor Niemöller is, I think he's a pastor in Germany, and I think he's a Lutheran pastor, and he survived the Nazi era. And he's very famous for the poem or the quote, and he wrote, it's called First They Come. And so let me read this poem to you. First they came. First they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for trade unionists. I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out for me. At last, but not the least, I want you to meet my mother. Remember I told you that I called her about 2 days ago and told her this is what I'm going to talk about? I think sometimes that true inspirations comes from people in our lives, our families, our friends, the loved ones. And I want you to hear what she said. After talking to her about 15 minutes or so, my mother said this over the phone, and so why don't you play it?
当你为他人争取权利的同时，也在为自己争取权利。
So my mom parenting, my mom never even went to college, and she doesn't speak English, doesn't even speak Mandarin, so she spoke in a Sichuan dialect. In translation, and this is what she said: when you advocate for others, you also advocate for yourself. Thank you very much.